Hi everyone. Yeah, so welcome. So finally glad to start this channel. Right. So I was inspired to do this because I've got a lot of question on the actual field, and also I've sort of tweeted a lot about how actuaries are sort of making impacts, right? The kind of work we do, right? So this video is just a very short video to sort of explain what we do as actuaries, right? And also sort of explain that actuarial field and maybe some intersection with quant field also. Then we then move into some different topics. So you might see me looking down, right? That's because I'm using my I've got my iPad to write, and I also look using the camera from my laptop, right? So, and also bear with me just in case. This is my first time trying to make this kind of recording, right? So I do make some recording, but not like this. So today's focus is just basically these five key focus, right? What the field entails in terms of the supply and demand, and of course, the career paths in terms of the kind of service they render, the key skills, the sector compensation. That's also important part that you do always want to know about. Then, how do you transit into the actuarial and quant field, right? Particularly for accounting and finance background, STEM graduates. And also the common pathway, whether you want to go through an experience route, professional exams, masters. Of course, few things that you need to know about the exam is very important that I sort of give that caveat and some concluding remarks based on my own personal view, right? So I'll start with, to kickstart a little about me, right? So my name is Mike Oladeji. I currently work as a senior manager in one of the consulting firm here in Nigeria, Lagos. I've been in the actuarial and quant industry for about 6 years. But before that, I started in core accounting, finance, and doing some quant work in power sector. Right, so it's been quite interesting, and interesting, but again, it comes with its own challenges. That they are not so bad. So let's start. And of course, this channel, the intention of this channel is just to it's going to be a mix of different things, but specifically on actuarial quants and some complex accounting, right? And that's because that's where I work, right? So basically, I'll just be sort of sharing my experience, sharing maybe some technical materials, of course, explaining some technical concepts, models, of course, maybe possibly sharing some learnings from my own career paths, and possibly bring in some experienced professionals also to come share their own learnings and advice on their career paths, particularly as it relates to the actual quant field, and we'll be focusing more on Nigeria and Africa also. So let's start. So today's focus, like I said, is just going to be on these five key areas. So let's start with actual science, right? So I think there was a survey conducted by one of the professional bodies, even in US. For most people, they don't even understand. Some think is relating to animal science, right? Or something. Oh, what was actual animal science? Are you a science? Are you a biologist? People refer to it as different things, right? But this is not to give you a academic definition, or this is more or less to make it go, right? So when we say actuaries, right, or actuarial science, basically it's just the way I see actuarial science or quants is more or less like let's speak for four different angles. So I'll pick mathematics, I'll pick statistic, I'll pick finance. Then maybe these days I'll put programming there. Right. So actual science sits in the intersection. So I'll just say it's just like it lies at that intersection of statistics, mathematics, finance, and maybe programming these days, right? Of course, because the knowledge of these four areas, you can use it in maybe managing risk and uncertainty. A lot of things we do relate to risk and uncertainty. So that's why, that's a brief about what we do. So it's more or less using statistics, mathematics, programming, finance to bring them together, right? So actual science lies in the intersection of all these core fields, right? And of course, it's already evolving, right? A lot of things, new things come out like AI, data analytics, right? You see all this embedded in actual science. Of course, for most people that even have more understanding, right? They think actual science is just insurance. No, that's not it. Although actual science is a very key discipline when it comes to insurance industry, right? So there's no any other discipline that has that body of knowledge that's more or less serve as a foundation for what we do in insurance business. But actual science or actuaries, they work beyond insurance, and we'll see the other industry or what they do in other industry, right? So essentially it's just that field that lies at the intersection of these three things, right? So that's what's actually. So if you think about quant, some people can relate it to quant, right? Quant is also that field that lies at the intersection of these four things. The only key difference is that for an actuary, actual science, the fact that what they do in insurance industry is what set them insurance, pension, healthcare, because they deal with the kind of risk that deals with maybe like a mortality demographic, right? Demographic data, right? But quants don't really deal with that. But in terms of the knowledge, the body of knowledge, the mathematics, the statistic, right, stochastic process, they use almost the same terminology. So that's why you could see people transit between these two fields, right? You can transit from being an actuary to go to quant field and vice versa, provided you meet some certain requirements, right? So most times what you see the core quant guys focus on, they focus on more on derivative valuation, they focus on more on financial risk management. So in the bank, you see, so financial risk management is big, right? It's quite big because for banks, financial service is very key, right? They focus on maybe like quant trading that you see, maybe like those forex trading, right? They focus also they have programming, right? So essentially, it's almost the same knowledge, the same body of knowledge. For a lot of content you have in quant, you find it in actual. A lot of content you find in actual, you find it in quant. The only difference is the fact that the human nature in terms of insurance, pension, those kind of dealings that you see in actuarial, you may not find that in quants, right? So that's, the background to the field. So if I should move to, okay, that's just a brief about it. Of course, for you to want to know more, you can use your AI, right? In terms of the supply, so let's think through, the supply globally, right? So the first thing is that from a global context, we just have about 80,000 actuaries, global content. And of course, of these 80,000 actuaries, you have, it's deeply concentrated in US and UK, right? So that's where majority of the actuaries are concentrated, right? So, but let's bring it home to Africa. And of course, if you compare this, 80K actuaries, but in terms of accountants, you can think about how many accountants do we have? We have about 2 million accountants globally, right? Of course, if you look at it from a CFA, certified financial analyst, I think you have about 250K, if I'm not wrong, CFA charter holder, right? And comparing that with actuaries and this other profession, they sort of play, they have different roles they play in when it comes to stability of the financial system or even stability of the economic as a whole, because the core business, formal sector lies, these professions are the backbone of the financial business. Anything that involve money in the world, right? So you could see that there's shortage of actuaries globally. So there's shortage there's no doubt. If you go to US, you see a lot of openings when it comes to actuaries. Of course, the same thing in UK, right? Of course, we see that. But let's come home also in Nigeria. So if we take it to Nigeria or Africa, let's say Africa rather. In Africa, I think we have less than 3,000 actuaries in Africa, right? And of these less than 3,000, SA has about 25 approximately. Then you probably have Kenya, East Africa, particularly, you have maybe like 100. Then you have maybe Nigeria. Currently maybe like about 30 actuaries that qualify. When we say actuaries in this case, not student actuaries, right? Qualify those that have written all the exam, have passed all the exams. So that shows. And in Nigeria, we have about 60,000 approximately 60,000 chartered accountants, right, in Nigeria. And we also have maybe about 200 to 250 CFA holder in Nigeria, right? So that sort of show you the context that, oh, there's a shortage of these 30 qualified actuaries that are registered in Nigeria, right? I mean, I'm not sure about half of them are not even domiciled or maybe in Nigeria again. I mean, some of them have already Japan moved out of the country. So of course they still do support the kind of work that happens when it comes to the Nigeria actuarial space, right? So this just sort of giving us some context in terms of, so it means that the supply far outweigh the demand, right? The supply, of course, you see what is driving the supply, because the work they actually does is quite enormous, right? Because a lot of industry, I mean, beyond insurance, that you see actually supporting, right? Healthcare, you can think of pension, retirement planning, investment company, right? Banks, regulators, right? A lot, and we'll see that also. Now let's look at, why do you think the reason for the shortage? I mean, personally, if I should think about what's the reason for the shortage, I think the first thing is the fact that there is little awareness, there's lack of awareness. I think awareness is another thing, right? Right, of course, the awareness and education about um, actual science is also is minimal. It's not like that of finance or accounting, right? And of course, there are other attractive alternative. People would not, because it's easier to be, not like it's easier to be a chartered accountant or a CFA holder. I mean, in terms of the exam, right? It's more, I mean, the route, the time to completion when it comes to historically for a chartered accountant compared to an actuary, right? Is, I mean, the chartered accountant or the CFA is quite shorter, right? So, and that's also lucrative because those industries, I mean, this profession, chartered accountants or CFA, they are also a very lucrative profession. You can also make very good money, right? So of course, the biggest one is also the rigorous certification. A lot of people, because actual exam is, it's a marathon. I mean, a lot. It takes a lot. I mean, it's quite intense, right? It's very, very intense, right? It takes a lot to write the exam in terms of the time commitment, even resources, the cost, sacrifice that you need to, I mean, you need to give to write this exam and pass this exam is quite a lot. But on the positive, the fact that you have this shortage, right? I mean, the demand for actuaries keep increasing, right? Because of course, why the demand keep going on? Because of course, we have different things now. There's growth in financial service sector. There's increase in insurance penetration, right? People are now more aware about insurance globally, not just in Nigeria, right, or in Africa, right? Some of these things, right, necessitated the need for the demand. Of course, there's also a lot of regulatory changes, right? You can see that you have I5 something, for example, you have risk-based regime, right? Even from a Basel or from a Solvency 2 that is for banking, sorry, for insurance. Basel is for banking, right? So these are some of the kind of drivers to the change in the industry, right? So that's, I mean, a bit about it, right? So if I should think about the difference, well, of course, I'm not centering this recording on the difference between actuarial science and quant. No, right? They are, like I mentioned, they are like two sides of the same coin, right? So they are almost the same, just that little difference in terms of specialization on the focus, right? But the skill sets are actually transferable, right? So that's, I think that's that on the first one. So we've done this. So let's look at the second one, the career paths, right? So before I move into the career path, I think the best way to move into the career path is to sort of discuss um, what kind of service do they render, just to give you an idea, right? I try to put in the kind of service they render. So yeah, so this kind of service, the kind of service, the actual, I mean, some of the actual service, quant service, very similar. So, for example, the actuaries are the one that does statutory valuation. I mean, the liabilities that you see in an insurance business book, I mean, is actually valued by an actuary, it's qualified actuaries, right? So, you also have defined benefit obligation from an IAS 19. I mean, for those that are finance, you related to that. How do they price your insurance, like the insurance products, right? How, I mean, things like asset and liability modeling, like 517, risk management, right? These are mortality projection. How do we project who will die? I mean, how many people will die next week, right? Those kind of projections, right? capital and solvency management, a lot of things in data analysis, right? So quant services also the same thing. So financial risk management in a bank, for example, the bank have market risk or liquidity risk departments, operational risk departments, credit risk departments. So the quant guys are the one that focus on doing the numbers, crunching this number. How do we know number of loans that will go into default, right? How do we know how much we'll lose in some of our investment portfolio, right? Derivative valuation, modeling. I mean, this is not financial models. We are talking about economic models, right? Where you are more or less projecting exchange rates. You are using stochastic approach, Monte Carlo simulations. I mean, those complex derivatives. Not talking about the plain vanilla derivative, right? Some of these derivatives might just be replicating instruments, right? So again, some of this quant trading, I mean, the forex trading. These are the kind of services or the kind of work that you then see the quant guys or even the actual guys do. So you can see that there are a lot of commonalities between the two, right? So those are some of the things. In terms of the skill sets, just following back from what I mentioned when it comes to what do they really do. The skill sets, I mean, I used to say just basically five skill sets, right? You can summarize this in these five buckets: mathematics and statistics, because a lot of things we do, they're actually deep on calculations, right? Modeling, they are deep on proper, I mean, core mathematics, not basic. I mean, the core mathematics, you can see the advanced statistic, right? So that's why sometimes you could see that, I mean, some people do have PhD in mathematics or PhD in computational finance or PhD in physics, right? To be able to excel well either in the quant field or in the actual field, as the case may be. Financial knowledge, right? Very important, because everything we do boils down back to the numbers. We need to feed it into the numbers, whether making decisions or numbers relating to financing. I mean, in terms of your financial statement, right? It boils down to the number. Analytical skills. Now, analytical skills is also important because everything we have to do, it has to follow an analytical process, right? You need to be very much analytical when it comes to the quant or the actual field, right? Communication is very important, right? Because a lot of things we do are very complex, so it's very important you can communicate these complex jargons in a non-complex manner to a non-quant person or a non-actuaries, right? So it's very important because in terms of our work, we do relate with maybe the other units that don't really understand this complex mathematics. You don't want to be using complex terms like OU process, Brownian motion. No, 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 no. You ought to know how to explain this result of your work to the non-actuaries or the non-quant person, right? And problem solving, right? Very important, because when it comes to what we do, sometimes what we'll do in 2 3 years time we don't know yet, right? So but we know that when the problem comes, we will find a way to solve it, right? Think about climate risk modeling now. So I mean, in the past exam you won't find climate risk in those exams, right? But because you've gone through the whole profession, the exams, right, we expect that you have that problem solving skill, be able to break down the problem into smaller pieces and then tackle it, right? So these are just the key skills when it comes to um these two field, right? When it comes to how the field that we play, right? I mean, when you become, I mean, for an actuary, you can be a lecturer, you can work in the academic, just be a lecturer teaching in class, of course. And there's large demand for lecturers in actual space in Nigeria, even in Africa, globally, right? Because I mean, in Nigeria, we don't have quite a number of actuaries, right? So lecturer is also important. Researcher, you can also be a researcher where you just research, sharing body of knowledge, right, to the whole industry, right? In the industry side, you can work in financial service, and financial service here refers to banks, right? Banks, I mean, a lot of banks in UK, US, you see them, they have actuarial department, actually, because the actuary work is not just only in the insurance. No, it's actually also in the bank. If you go to your LinkedIn, for example, just type JP Morgan, put FSA or IFO in front. You see quite number of IFOA, FIA fellows of FSA or UK zone that work in those banks, that are heading, either working in the investment team, working in some complex team, right? So again, also in pension industry, right? How do we know your the benefits? How do we design benefits, right? So actual is also working in that space. Investment and asset management in hedge fund, you see a lot of quant guys. Also the regulators. I mean, you can't. I mean, in Nigeria, well, of course, all these are regulatory bodies. CBN. I mean, central bank of, if you go to all the reserve bodies, whether in UK, US, Saudi Arabia, you then see actually sitting there, right? Of course. So that shows that regulators also need support from actuaries, right? Of course, you can choose to work in consulting, Big Four, be it Deloitte, EY, KPMG. and PwC, Billiman, we have Zamara, some of the consulting firm in Africa. You can also choose to be self-employed, where you just set up your own independent actuarial firm, or do some startup bits, a startup in insurance, or a startup in, in fintech space, right? Like a robo advisor, right? So again, these are some of the things actuaries does when it comes to in terms of the field, right? So if I go back to just to be sure, I've tackled this, I've tackled this compensation. If you want to know the compensation, I think the best way for the compensation is, if you just go to, of course, let me tell you the reality, right? In Nigeria, the way they pay actuaries is actually different from the non actuaries, right? So, for example, in some companies, insurance company or maybe pension companies, right? Depending on number of papers you've paid, your salary will increase depending on number of papers you paid. And of course, in Nigeria also, the average salary of an actuary, some people can earn as high as, if it's in dollars, they can earn as high as $10,000, right? Even being a qualified or a chief actuary, I've seen salary of a chief actuary that is as high as like 30 million per month, right? So that's crazy. In Africa, yeah. So that just gives you some context of in terms of the compensation. Of course, you can do your own further research when it comes to that, right? So let's move to the third part, which is how do you transition into this field? Now, you can, again, because the field is not just for those that study actuarial science in undergraduate or those that study specific courses in the undergraduate level, right? You can actually study different, just like in finance or in accounting, where people don't really necessarily have to study accounting, but to practice accounting, post university, right? So the same thing in actuarial science or quant field. You can study different things and then transit into this field. Or the core thing is that you need to develop those skill sets I've mentioned in terms of your mathematical skill, mathematics and statistics skill sets, in terms of your problem solving skill sets, in terms of analytical skill sets. Those are the important things, right? So let's pick an accounting or a finance graduate. For me, personally, I study accounting in University of Lagos, right? So again, and I've transited into this field in the last 6 years, right? So what it means is that you can actually transit, and if you go to do some research, I've done some research. If you check in India, for example, India is one of the region that is actually increasing their supply of actuaries in globally, right? In fact, some US company depends on Indians, right? So that's another way they are exporting knowledge, right? So and they are making a lot of money, even staying in India, working for companies in US, working for companies in Asia, in terms of Dubai, UAE, right? So, and most of them, if you check, even from LinkedIn, you see most of them don't even study actual science undergrad. Most of them actually study accounting, finance, economics, right? So, regardless of what you study, you can actually transit, right? An accounting graduate, you can transit. Once you know that you love numbers, you have interest in this field, of course do your research, you have interest in this field, and of course if you interested to transit, right, you just need some personalized advice. You can also reach out to me, right? I'll try to create time to explain to you what you need to do and help you decide if really this field is for you. For STEM graduates, whether you study mathematics, statistics, engineering, you already have that mathematics, statistics background. This is another field for you. It's not only accounting. A lot of time I see STEM graduates going to accounting, because they want to transit into business. They then think it's only accounting that is available for them. Actually, there is actual science and quant field available for you. The common pathway, I tell people that if you are currently working in a firm or in a business that in a company that requires support from actuarial support, or as an actuarial unit, or actuarial units, or those have a quant unit in terms of risk management, right? One of the easy way you can pathway is to look for a way to transit into that department, right? And maybe learn what they do in like 1 or 2 years before you start writing the exam, just to be sure that you are a good fit, right? Another way is just to take the exam. One of the way people show commitment that they really want to move is by even writing, even if it's one paper or two paper from any of these exams, be it from IFOA exam or be it from SOA exam, right? So we'll look at, because these are the cool, the IFOA is the UK exam, the SOA is the US exam. I'll go to their site now to just show you. And some can transit using masters. One of the things that you have in Nigeria now is that University of Lagos Actual Science Department, the masters, if you complete the masters, based on starting the grade, you can be qualified for 6 exemption. I think that's a very big one, right? So Unilag Masters in Actuarial Science is top notch. It gives you that exemption. It's also a route. I mean, 6 paper exemption. Some people, it takes them on average 6 years to even complete those 6 papers. But if you complete the Unilag Masters program and you meet certain grade, you'll be entitled. You can apply for exemption with I4A, and that's a very good one. I mean, it's a recent development that happens last year, thanks to Nigeria Actuarial Society for that also, right? So that's another pathway. I mean, for people that want to do quant, for example, you can do masters in financial engineering. What quant is also providing master is a free masters in financial engineering that you can also use to explore your interest in either quant, for example, not actuarial field, quant. The key difference between quant and actuarial is that while in actuarial field the professional exam is extremely important, but in quant field they are not so interested in the professional exam. In fact, in quant field they are more interested in your masters, whether you have a background in engineering, masters in engineering, or masters in mathematics or related field, right? Of course, these days, what happened in quant field is that people then write either CFE or FRM, right? Financial risk management is FRM. It's also an exam. It has 2 levels. CFE has 3 levels. This one has 2 levels. Unlike, and these 2 exams are OBJ, CFE and FRM. Only the final level that has some theory. I mean, in CFE. But when it comes to actual exam, it's more than that. I mean, it's a marathon. It's a number of paper. For example, in IFOA, to be a fellow, you have to write past 13 papers. In SOE also, you have to pass. There are different levels of paper. You have to pass like 6 papers to be an associate and 4 papers, but there are a lot of modules, right, to be a fellow, right? So we would also go to the site and just show you some of the things you can see there, right? So, but before I go to the site and show you some things, right, the few things I'll say about this exam is, first is that when it comes to actual exams, I used to tell people that the few things that I will say, there are 4. Let me put it this way. The first thing I will say is that they are very difficult. I think I've said that before. They are difficult, meaning it requires a lot of sacrifice and commitment. So that's the first thing. They are expensive. All these exams, you pay in dollars or in pounds. So it's quite expensive. So it means you can't come to the exam and just say, oh, I just want to do it for. No, no, no. People don't come and transit to actual. It's not like, these days you can see people there say, I just want to do ICANN or ACTA just for the having it. No, that's not, you don't do actual, because this takes a lot of time. It takes a lot from your life, right? So you can't use it to know. You have to be sure you really want to do this field, right? In fact, some people want to do this field and are not doing the exam. Not to then talk of you don't want to do the field. Now it's not possible, right? It's not possible because it will take a lot from you. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. I mean, there's a lot of, you're likely going to fail at least once. I mean, you're probably going to experience some challenges along the way, but what's really defining is not the number of failures, but how you learn from them, and of course how you then surmount some of these failures, right? Of course, I'll say the final thing for me is that it's very important you find a mentor, right? Even though I don't embrace mentorship, like in quotes, I mean the way it is, I think sometimes you need somebody ahead of you that have walked that same similar path to just guide you, help you when you are making some decision. Because coming to this field, you need to make decision about changing jobs, you need to make decision about writing exams, you need somebody to explain to you, oh, this is the next exam I think you should write, right? So you need those kind of guys. So those are the 4 things when it comes to me, right? Before I go to the concluding remark, what I'll do is that let me just show you some of the papers in IFOE, for example. IFOE is the UK one, is the Institute of Faculty of Actuaries, right? So you have 11 papers, and the papers are, I mean, the way they split the paper is you have papers that CB1, CB2, CB3. These are papers that relate to business. They relate to business management. You have papers that relate to mathematics, CM1, CM2. These are relating to actual mathematics. You have paper that relate to actuarial statistic, CS1, CS2. Then you have paper that relate to practice, actuarial practice, CP1, CP2, CP3. So let me just show you. Let me go to my IFOE. There's my code. So this IFOA handbook. I mean, you can go to that. I'll also drop the site so you can go there. So this is the handbook. So these are the papers you need to do to become a qualified actuary, right? So you can see you need to write all this paper, and then when you become an associate, to become a fellow, you then choose a field. Like I said, actuarial science is not just for insurance. You can see we have healthcare. I mean, actually, it's a key role in health. In fact, one of the biggest role. I mean, it's not just when we say healthcare, not health insurance. Oh, the whole end to end of healthcare, from the companies that produces the medicine to the HMOs to the government. I mean, a lot. Life insurance, you have pension and benefits. You also see, fellow, you can choose a route to become investment and finance, because investment and finance is also a core part of what we do as actually. But in this case, we are doing it in the deeper, I mean, deeper realm. You can see we have a paper that is just on derivative alone, financial derivative. So not the basic derivative. These are advanced derivative, and this is one of the route I'm following. Also, you have on general insurance, you have on enterprise risk, right? You also have on banking. Of course, I'll drop this just so if you're interested in it, right? You can also check the SOA also. So the SOA also have different routes. These are the exams. The SOA website, to be an associate, you need to write different exams and different modules, right? You need to write different exams to be an associate. To be a fellow also, you need to write different exams. You can also check that out. The number of exams, actually, you write like 6 exams. You need to pass some modules. This exam, this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You write 6 exams to be an associate, but you then need to pass some modules also, right? So these are some of the things. In quant, FRM is gap. Of course, you can check that out. I also put that, and then there's also CQF, quite expensive. Also, is also for quant, not purely for actuaries. Right? You can also check that out, right? So let me give you example of, to see some example of the paper. What is in the paper? So I open CS2, for example. So this is one of the papers. So look at some of the topics there. So you see. So you can see the topics there: stochastic process, Markov chain, Markov model. These are some of the topics in. I mean, this is one of the paper in IFOE. Exposed to it, you can see time series, extreme value, loss distribution, risk models, couplers, machine learning. Right. These are some of the paper in one of the paper. If I should open another one, I think I have another one, same one. Same one. So these are some of also the topics there. You see, so let me go down to where you have the topics. Um, so look at the topics here. So you have the first part that relates to financial mathematics, basically actual modeling, loan, life table, annuities. You can see gross premium, reserving, mortality profit, reserving, profit testing. So a lot of very complex things, right? So you just need to have, of course, for anyone that is interested. I mean, you can also more or less show me, more or less reach out and maybe able to help, right? So I think that's on that. So I think I've been able to cover everything. Then my concluding remarks is to say that, to be honest, like in many fields, right, this profession requires you to build capacity to take pain and failures. To really succeed, you need to build, because to succeed in the exam, you need to have that capacity to take pain and failures, because some of the pain you need to sacrifice a lot, commitment to the exams, because it takes a lot to go through the exam. So because it's a marathon, like I mentioned. So first thing, how do you build your pain? You need to build your pain threshold. That's what I tell people, right? It's also important to let you know that it's hard. It's very hard. So for you to go further in it, it means you need to have a strong itch for it. In fact, having a strong itch for it is not enough for you to succeed. In fact, the chances that you would give up along the way is actually very high, right? The chances that you stay to the end is slim. However, if you choose to give up and leave, it's normal. I mean, that means you are normal. If you choose to stay to see to the end, that means you're abnormal. That's what I tell people, that you are really abnormal. Of course, this profession requires a lot of relentlessness, right? So because, I mean, like I say, you fail, recover, and try again. The exams are very tedious, rigorous, but the reward, I mean, are so massive. You can imagine, I mean, within 10 years of your career, you can be a chief actuary, meaning you can be at that exec level, right? That's what actual profession offers. Like within 10, 15 years of your career, you can be, provided you've passed all the exam, you can get to be an executive director. I know somebody in Nigeria. I mean, if you check, you see some people, qualified actuaries in Nigeria, that within 10, 15 years, they're already executive director. So you can also check it out on LinkedIn, right? That would also help you, right? So, of course, what I'll say to people is that as many of you that will choose to explore this profession, I think it's worth a try. Provided you are convinced, do your research, ask questions. I mean, link up with people on LinkedIn. I mean, most times you probably don't find actuaries on Twitter. They don't have time for that. But I think on LinkedIn there are quite a number of either student actuaries, people that are working in industry. Ask questions. This might be your calling, and I mean, if it's your calling, I mean, I wish you all the best. And of course, thanks for listening, and do subscribe to the channel. Bye.